Hello, we're live.
Here. How's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How
Good.
are you doing?
Good. Good. Do you want to introduce yourself to
Yeah.
people that are
All right.
watching?
Yeah. Oh, nice music. Hey, I'm Jay Hill. I'm a character artist in the video game industry, and I make models and I sculpt and stuff. So today we're gonna do a sculpt study of hands, which is something I do, and thought we could just go through the process in real time, kind of take any questions that come in, and maybe we could just chat a little bit about why that I think it's a good thing to do studies like this, not just huge projects. But yeah, we'll see how far we can get in this stream if we can sculpt a hand.
Oh, cool. Sweet. I'm looking forward to watching you do this. The ZBrush for me has always been something that's been very cryptic and scary to get into.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the classic. I just chose a sphere, by the way, from the Lightbox menu. So we're just gonna start messing around with some stuff that they already have. Make it a little bit bigger, which will give me more Dynamesh resolution. But yeah, so I've heard the common complaint is that it's such an alien feeling software, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe it's too big now. And that's generally true, I think, but it's been so long, like it's been more than 10 years for me now, so I don't even remember. Oh, maybe I should show. So I took some photos just before we got on stream. Um, so it's one of the things I like about doing hand studies is hands are complicated. I'd say hands and heads, are up there. Hands being a little bit more doable, but they both can have a lot of character and emotion. I think new people kind of underestimate how much a hand um, can emote. And so yeah, they're complicated. They make you go through all the motions in sculpting, like and especially like in ZBrush, like you'll see, like we're going to be using masks and Dynamesh and a bunch of sculpting tools. So I think it's a good challenge, and you have to kind of hit likeness a bit because it's such a normal thing that we're used to seeing. But then you have like references, all the time. You have your hands. So I think it always makes for a good study. So if someone wants to practice, I think it's good. Feet are probably a little bit easier, and then maybe an ear is the easiest. So that's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah.
That's why I chose hands to do studies on.
And
So yeah, right now we're just gonna get the normal shape. Yeah, what's up?
nice. And this is just an exercise you do, just to stay sharp and keep your skills up. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, it seems like there are a few really long questions in the page so far.
That's cool.
I
Let's
could,
do
I
long
could
questions.
Cool. Well, I'll start with Gnome. He says, "Hey, Jay, thanks for the demo. I'm a student considering transition from 2D to 3D, which is really a tough choice. A bit of an identity crisis, really. Wanted to be a fantasy illustrator.
Smart man.
He wanted to be a fantasy illustrator, but recently dawned on him what he really wants to do is eventually direct video games. So 3D production seems like a more suitable path." His first question is, are you coming from a 2D background? Did you find it necessary to drop one of these to achieve mastery in the other? Is it possible to maintain high skills in both 2D and 3D? Is it useful for a 3D artist to be a capable draftsman as well?
Nice. Are those numbered? Can I go through them like one by one? What was the
Well, I guess
the first one?
that's question number one.
I think the first one is or like the first part of that question I mean was did I start with a 2D background? I think that's what it started with.
Yeah.
I guess technically you can say that. I've been drawing from a young age. My parents just kind of fostered that and let me do that. They were both artists of one kind or another, not professional or anything. They were both teachers, but they both drew well into their adulthood, which isn't that common. So they were supportive in that way and got me, interested. Sorry if you hear got a screaming baby in the background too. It's a full immersive experience. Yeah, so I guess I had a drawing background. People used to tell me when I was like in elementary school, they're like, you should work for Disney, and I was like, can I? Is that even a thing? So I did draw. I've always drawn, and I usually drew people. So I don't know if that counts though. I'm not like a traditionally taught 2D artist. Although when I did go to college, I went to the Art Institute in Orange County, and they did do like life drawing. Charles Hugh instructed that class, who's an accomplished life drawing instructor and stuff. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my 2D experience.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard it's from both 2D artists and 3D artists that learning the opposite, or learning 2D as a 3D artist is really important, and learning 3D as a 2D artist is also really useful. Like doing a crochets and stuff.
Yeah, I would say that was kind of another part of that question. I would say like the best answer is you do not need to be able to do 2D to do 3D and vice versa. But it helps. Everything helps. That's kind of the thing about art, you know. Like one of the sculpting heroes of a lot of 3D people is Simon Lee, who goes by Spider Zero online. He can't even draw. He says he can't even draw like stick figures, you know. And he's a great sculptor. And then I'm sure there are 2D people that aren't great at sculpting. But so you can't be. I think another question was, can you be accomplished in both or master both? I think that's a stretch because you could dedicate your entire life to one or the other. But like even today, I mean, even nowadays, I still do quote unquote 2D sometimes when it's useful. I'll do my own paint overs. I'll do my own concepts for myself. I'll work things out because it's useful. But I don't, I'm not pursuing that as some kind of anything. I'm just using that as a tool. And then I think it's wise to kind of pick one to focus more on. You could focus 100%, but like I say, I think if you just with all life experience, it would help your art. If you did a little bit of 2D, that might help your 3D. I definitely know that 3D helps 2D. Because you have to have like this, like we're doing now with this hand, like you have to have this kind of 3-dimensional understanding. So I think it just like I think doing one sculpt study is probably equivalent to doing 10 or more drawings of the same subject, because you have to like think of it all angles. And then finally, I would say in terms of advice for what you're doing and everything, nowadays, so here's the thing, 3D and rendering is getting better and faster and more accessible all the time. Even now, Adobe announcing they're going to come out with a modeling program. They have a rendering thing. Rendering's getting like photorealistic rendering is getting faster. So I just think if you're interested at all in image making, even if that's conceptual art for video games, knowing 3D, I don't see any reason not to learn 3D. If people are just like, oh, I don't want to, it's hard. That's not a good reason.
Right.
Especially if you want to do something professionally, it's like, yeah, so what, I mean, it's an amazing tool, and you could use it to make anything look better, like you're just going to get eaten up by people that do use 3D and then do paint overs or, whatever. I mean, you could just use it. So why not use it instead of forcing yourself to like, do the same thing that people did in the 70s for no good reason.
Right.
So that would be my advice.
Sounds like good advice. Yeah, I think the answer is always like, 3D is a really powerful tool for 2D artists, and for a 3D artist, obviously, like even when you're a sculptor, your images are being seen or your sculptures are being seen on a screen in 2D a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, it's super good to like be thinking like that. A lot of people don't realize that. Yeah, because like all of the work on my portfolio is 2D. Even though obviously I did it all in 3D, but people are looking at 2-dimensional images. So like, if I painted on top of it, what's the difference? I mean, whatever. So there's definitely a purism that people kind of box themselves in when they're starting out. But yeah. A lot of what 3D artists do is 2D. If you think about like Instagram posts, portfolio posts, if it's not like rotating and taking full advantage of 3D, then you really are making 2D images. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Well, I guess here's a second question. This is
Nice.
2 of 4 questions. Looking at the field from the outside, what worries me is that success seems like it's more based on soft workflow knowledge rather than pure skill.
Oh,
What do you think? How would you compare these?
I would strongly
the two?
disagree with that. I would strongly disagree with that. I think it's there's a word for that, right? Meritocracy. I think entertainment art is very much a meritocracy, meaning like it's based on your merits. That's what like your skill. That's what I like about it. Honestly, like you know, it's not true 100%. I don't know if there is 100% meritocracy out there. Obviously, like there's a lot of factors. But I, you know, was pretty aimless in my teens and stuff, not knowing exactly what to do. And like I say, I always did a little bit of art. Wasn't sure I could turn that into anything. But once I focused in on this idea of doing 3D modeling, and I really like 3D modeling, I kind of just told myself that like if you get really good at 3D modeling, something's gonna happen. And so that was a very simple way to focus my like energy and thinking, and you know, simplify my life or career goals in that way. And that pretty much worked out. And anyone that I like, another way of saying it is talented or skillful. So a better way of saying it, skillful artists will find work. Like you might find people that aren't at a high skill that have jobs and they figured that out, which I think is harder to do in a way. But there aren't a lot of people that are skilled that are having trouble finding work. And what I did was, you know, more than 10 years ago, there's so many more jobs now, and there's going to be more jobs. So yeah, if you can, so a simple way of putting it is if you can work on your skill, regardless of software, something's going to happen, and software is going to change. You know, like ZBrush wasn't even around when I started college, or maybe it was, but nobody knew about it, and it wasn't at the school. So I got it halfway through college. So it's thinking back, it's crazy to even think like, what was I doing? I guess I was just box modeling, and I thought that's what I was going to do.
Right.
But yeah, software always changes. Skill you're going to build for life. I think that's the way to simplify it. Software really doesn't matter. And I've even been hired at a AAA company working on a multi-million-dollar game. And in the interview, they asked me what I used, and I said Maya. They said okay. And when I started, there was 3D Studio Max on the computers, and I was like, oh, I use Maya, and they're like, we don't have that. So day one, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then I had to figure out some software. So I can tell you that software doesn't matter as much as you think.
Yeah. Well, to me, it seems like more just being open-minded to the tools and, you know, the creative process in general, where if you only ever spent, you know, time doing figure sculpture and you wanted to work in games, you would probably never learn the skills to actually work in games. You know,
Yeah, games has more and more become, which I like. That's something I like about it is like character artists or 3D modelers and stuff. It's better to be knowledgeable and comfortable with a lot more of the process. When I was going to school, there'd be specialties, and there still are in some cases, but for the vast majority of gigs, you're expected to be able to do the high poly model, the low poly model, and the texturing, and even some of the like shader material settings. And when I was coming up, that was specialized. There would be a 3D modeler, and then there would be a texture artist, and then sometimes a shader artist. And so on a few big productions, it's like that. But like I say, for the vast majority, you're kind of expected to just make an asset. That's what they want, you know? So if you're working on most games or most real-time stuff, they're going to hire you to make a 3D model, and that means like everything like soup to nuts. And so I kind of like that. But yeah, so if you're thinking about games, then you'd want to learn all that. What I did was I focused on modeling first. Ooh, got a little echo. What I did was focus on modeling first, and like I say, back then it was kind of specialized. So I think that's what I wanted. That was the job I was most interested in at that time, because texturing and shadering and rendering wasn't that cool. So if you think like the first Gears of War, that was kind of, you know, my time, and I was like, oh yeah, this is dope. I want to make super detailed models like this. And then at my job, I got exposed to a talented texture artist. There's this guy, Mike Brainerd, who was doing amazing textures. And I saw his like texturing workflow and I was like, oh, and it kind of opened my mind to pursuing that. So I was already hired, you know, as kind of a modeler, and I started focusing more on texturing. So I kind of built it over time, and that might be a useful thing to do, is to kind of focus. And I think like sculpting now, like what I'm doing now with the hand, right? Like sculpting, modeling is still like the bedrock for me.
Yeah.
And programs like Substance Painter have made texturing so much easier, even though it might not be easy, but like getting in there and making good textures, you're a lot more enabled now. And then the rendering, real-time rendering, so much better. It's so good. And it's just going to keep getting better. All right, so I'm turning, just real quick, I'm going to up the Dynamesh now. I'm thinking this is a good enough kind of start. And so I just raised it, and then I turned off blur because I don't need that. And maybe I'll turn on project, which will keep the shape. It'll take a little bit longer, but it'll keep the shape. Maybe I need to go a little bit higher. 128. There we go.
Cool. Well, I guess their next question is, could you zero, excuse me, could you zero in on the fundamentals of 3D and the ways one should go about learning them? What are some good resources to draw from? Any books? What about exercises?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I kind of look, I'd say sculpting, if you're doing any kind of organic or creature stuff, if you're doing anything character related, sculpting, let's save too, so we don't, you know, freak out here. Yeah, if you're doing any kind of character related work, sculpting is really good. And exercises is like what I mentioned. This is all character related. I'll try to go like higher to modeling, but doing ears, I think, is a good thing to start with because they're complicated. They make you kind of figure out how to do these like convex forms and turned forms and everything. And you got a lot more wiggle room. And then hands being more difficult, and then heads being the most difficult. And honestly, like any of that stuff's going to take years probably, but heads will take the longest time. It'll take multiple years before you're, you know, consistently sculpting heads that you're somewhat happy with. You know, I'm never like perfectly content, but when you're starting out, you're going to make a lot of heads that don't look right, and it's going to be frustrating because you're not exactly sure why. Kind of the same with hands, but they're a little bit more forgiving. And like I said, you have them right here, right? So, and that's the stuff that I do. And so that's what I would recommend, because that is why I'm doing it. I think it's the best way to keep working on skills, because here's the thing. You know, we mentioned ZBrush being strange, and that's true. But as with anything, like, you know, the fact I'm super comfortable just manipulating. Like if I want to come in here, I want to do this, you know, I set up my hotkeys to switch to my most common brushes. I arranged my UI to go in the order of my preferred workflow, you know, and I can just do whatever I want. So, and I'm not thinking about it. So that's a result, and that kind of is it's a product of spending time in ZBrush and doing this. So as much as like Sculpting Hands is good for you, it's not because, you know, your goal should be like, I'm going to make a photorealistic hand and I'm going to put it on my portfolio and I'm going to get a job. It's more like practice, you know? It's more like the stuff that people don't see really. I post it because, you know, I want to, you know, put stuff out there. But you don't have to do that. I didn't do that when I was learning. And so it's more like an athlete doing the things, you know, that isn't televised, and you're just working on it so that you don't have to think about it. So when you are doing projects that are more important, you're not stumbling over the UI and all these little things. So in CG, the fundamentals are these like are more than, you know, physical, right? You have to get used to looking at things and breaking down their shapes, kind of understanding shapes and form in a way where you can visualize it and then attempt to recreate it. And then there's the actually using of the software. You know, a lot of people, their whole job is using software, and there's not an art element. And that's a whole thing, is learning all the ins and outs of a software. So we have to do both. So what you want to do with these studies is that they're shorter. You know, bigger projects can take months. And so shorter projects can take as little as 1 day, which you could get, you know, if you did an ear or you did a foot or you did a hand, that could be 1 or 2 days. So you can do a lot more of those. And then you get all this mileage of using the program of, like, you know, all of a sudden, you know, after a while, your fingers are just doing it and you're not even thinking about it. And that's the whole point of practicing and stuff, so that, you know, your mind, you can just slip into the zone. And what you want to get to eventually is you think like, I want to change this form in this way. You know, in your mind, you're just like, oh, this needs to be like this. And then you just start doing it. And you're not thinking about, okay, what do I press? And then where do I go? And that only happens with repetition and mileage. And then once you get there, then you get to think, then it's more fun. You can think about the creative thing of like, what do I want to make, or what do I want to say with my art? But fundamental wise, this is what it's about, is getting comfortable with the software and breaking down forms and creating them. Like, how can I make certain shapes? And the more, you know, the more you get comfortable and understand making certain types of shapes, the more things you can make, and it just builds confidence. And now all of a sudden you can start choosing, like, you know, the subjects that you want to do to make a bigger project, to say something a little bit more. So these studies are more catered for that building of fundamentals in general to begin with.
And like, I've heard, you know, dozens and dozens of artists say this, but, you know, the fundamentals are always something you'll be studying. You know, it's something that you never stop trying to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still sculpting hands now, you know what I mean? It's been a long time.
Yeah. Do you think you'll stop sculpting?
This is a real B&H customer.
Sorry.
Oh, wow.
Do you think you'll ever stop sculpting hands?
I would say no right now. I mean, here's the thing. That's another reason why I'm doing it, right? Is same reason why I would sculpt heads, is if I wanted to do a character or some piece of work that evoked an emotion, which is kind of, you know, the ultimate thing that I'd like to do. But I put a lot of importance and stock into that. But if the head and the hands aren't right, then you kind of broke the whole thing, you know? So because they are complicated, because they are so important, I work on them so that I have more confidence doing them, and I feel more comfortable doing them. I have more experience doing them. And so it takes that edge off, you know, so that when I do something that I think is more important to me, I'm not like, oh shit, you know, I have to do these hands, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a way for me to jump in and stay sharp and just keep, you know, punching that demon in the face of, you know,
Self-doubt.
Sculpting things that are hard. Yeah. So I feel like if I just keep sculpting things that are hard, then I won't freak out and freeze up, you know?
Right. This is the fourth part to their question. It's unrelated to this fundamentals of sculpture, but finally, how do you think AI such as those already used in facial animation on Avengers Infinity War will affect the field in the near future? How can 3D artists hope to keep their jobs still relevant in the future, and where a machine is relevant for the bulk of the work?
Yeah, super good question, and good that they're thinking about that. My thinking is this. I think about this too, because it's like, I think it's going to affect my life and career. So AI is a thing, and it's going to happen. And also, I just know from experience in the industry that just the way the economy of, you know, games is really all I can speak to. But, you know, you mentioned a movie, and I know this is true of a movie too, is the higher up you go, the more you get to the investor type people, and they want a good product, right? So if there's a way where people can think that, like, if we buy this thing, or if we invest in this thing, then it'll be faster, it'll be more accurate, and will remove humans, they're incentivized to do that. So as a person who is trying to be hired or employed, you know, to make this kind of stuff, I think of it like I need to build my skills and create a portfolio or an image that I make things that don't exist that you can't easily create without a person, you know, to put it real broad. AI, it's hard to like predict exactly what AI is going to do. I think first thing's probably going to be like topology and UV mapping, which is great. That's something that modelers haven't wanted to do for like 20 years. And students still have to come to grips with like, you have to do that by hand. It's still the best way. So that seems like something AI would be able to do soon. And then when it comes to like actual creativity, I don't think it's going to be the same. You know, like, you know, eventually probably going to have AI write a novel, right? Reading a novel by an AI, I don't know if it's going to be this. To me, that defeats the point. You know, like you're not reading a novel just to read words. I think you're a human created something for other humans, and that's what art is. I think it's this communication between humans. So I still think the more creative you get, the less AI can do that same thing. Recreating reality, people are still, all the smart people are trying to do that now. ILM's doing that, right? Everybody's trying to do that. So building a portfolio of real people by hand isn't a smart thing to do. But if you were to build a portfolio of things that were more fantastic and like creatures or any kind of style that's a little bit different, if you wanted to kind of foster your own look or do a variety, that would be the way to like raise your chances. That's all we can do. Another kind of way of looking at it that I've thought about is, again, AI is a wild card, right? But if you take the film industry, you have this like 100 years of cameras and photography, right? And then when Toy Story comes along, it doesn't seem like something that fits in, you know? Like that rather than photograph something, we're going to do this roundabout way where we like create things on a computer that don't look realistic. And is it a cartoon or what? You know, there's so much effort, so much technology going into this thing. But then it turns into this, you know, big hit and amazing category of films that I would consider like very artistic, right? All of the films they've made now. So there's something to say about that. And I think that's the kind of work that artists would always be able to get, you know, is inventing these new things. And I think audiences are hungry for that type of stuff, making new experiences, because life's all around us. So I think there's always going to be this category in games and in movies of worlds and characters that don't exist and you can't scan them and they need a human touch. And so being able to figure out, like tap into that type of stuff and market yourself as someone who can do that, I think is the thing that would raise your chances.
That was a very good answer. Marcus Johnson says, "Hi Jay, I'm a fan of your work and your time lapses and tutorials on YouTube.
Thank you.
My question is regarding anatomy practice. What does structured practice actually look like and consist of in practical terms for an aspiring 3D artist or digital sculpt? It's multiple parts again. I'll
Okay.
answer that.
Cool. Anatomy. He's talking about form practice, structure. Or
yeah.
something?
Like what does a structured practice look like in terms of practical terms for an aspiring 3D artist?
Pretty much like studies like this, you know. I mean, I think a good visual example would be Glauco Longi. I might be mispronouncing his name, so I apologize for that. I just read it, but he's on Instagram too. He's even recorded, or he took images of his anatomy studies and he put them into like a PDF. But it's kind of what I'm doing, but you could do a torso, you could do a leg. You don't really. I do think students are hungry for like a schedule, you know, like a recipe. But I think it's more accurate to think about the end goal, which is you're confident enough to make something that doesn't exist. You know, like we say, you want to build the back end, the tools and the shape language and the experience, so that when you could think like, oh, I'm gonna make this guy with a buff arm, and then you could just make a guy with a buff arm, right? That's what you want. So to get there, it's about getting experience, and not everyone is going to learn exactly the same way. So that's why I love doing studies in 3D more than 2D. Like I would recommend even 2D artists to do it, because you have to you just have to understand the volume and space things take up in a way you don't have to do in 2D. In 2D, it's more about graphic, flat, like from perspective shapes. So if you did multiple arms, so what I'm doing is multiple hands, multiple heads, right? I'm going to get, just by the nature of doing that, I'm going to have more comfort, and I'll be able to more quickly identify if something's off and how to fix it just by that experience. So if you're doing anatomy, if you're weak in something, I'd say attack what you're weak at and just do more than one. And you should also be sculpting like every day, honestly. If you want to be as good as you can, at least 2 hours a day, I would say. And yeah, if you're weak at torsos is a good one, right? If you're weak at torsos, then sculpt a torso and limit yourself to 3 hours, and then the next day do another one, and then do another one, so that they become less precious. And then you're doing repetition now. You're gonna get faster at building it up, and then you could even do ones that are like more what do they call that? A torche or something, whatever, like skinless. You know, you could do buff ones, you could do thin ones. You could do male and female, and then that's it. I mean, there's, like I say, just keep doing different ones, and that's going to get you what you want, I think. Something I think is going to be a theme, right, is people want to know kind of the simplest or the most direct way. And I think the best advice I can give is to do something so much that it's not a big deal anymore, and
Right.
be aware that there is a inclination that we all have to build something up, you know, because anatomy is important. Everyone says anatomy is important, and so people are like, oh man, what do I do? And so you spend a lot of time, and I know this because I do this, and I've done it for a long time, and I'm aware of it. I'm trying to avoid this kind of trap, to overthink and overplan and over prepare rather than sitting your butt in a chair and doing it, because that could be uncomfortable, but it's really only uncomfortable at the beginning. You know, if you can set aside some time to just sculpt in peace with music or whatever you want, and just take a couple hours to do a study of some piece of anatomy, it's gonna be good for you, and that's really the most important thing to do. And don't care about the result. You know, it's such a cliche that it's about the journey, but detaching yourself from the result is so important in getting better, because we all want to make like the coolest thing, and rather than getting that really important mileage in practice, we just end up a lot of times like biting off projects that are too big, over planning, like I say, like too much time not doing the thing. So just do it, don't care about it, and you're gonna be so much better for it. In a few years, you're gonna be miles ahead of where you would have been.
Right. Yeah, the term that I hear people use is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's going to take.
That's a good way. Exactly.
Yeah, it takes
marathon.
a dozen years to become proficient at art. So you should really take your time and really enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Scott says hi, by the way.
Hey, Scott. What's up, dude? Scotty Flanders, dude. We worked on Evolve together.
Yeah.
We made a robot. Remember when we made a robot, dude?
Pretty neat. I guess this is relevant to what you were saying before. It's the question is, further to this, do you have any recommendation on how 3D sculptors can get the most out of old school anatomy manuals like Bridgman, Hogarth, or Peck? Is it a case of reading cover to cover and soaking up the knowledge, or trying to recreate a lot of the 2D illustrations as 3D forms?
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of a Bridgman hater, you know, to be honest with you.
No.
Yeah, yeah. All the 2D people love him, and that might be what it is. It's just like I'm just countering like how much my friends love the dude. But yeah, as a 3D artist, I've not found the 2D anatomy stuff to be that helpful. I really recommend in terms of books. There's the books Anatomy for Sculptors, and they've got several now. Ones that focus on the. You can just get the one that says Anatomy for Sculptors. I think it's the number 4. And they have one for the head and neck. They might have one for expressions. But that one's great because it's thinking about it as real form. It's got like 3D breakdowns. They can turn it. Like those 2D manuals have a lot of prestige at this point. But in my experience, 2D artists like put it on a pedestal for how cool and graphic it looks and like how the pencil strokes look and that kind of shit. And that doesn't help 3D. You know, it's very, very 2D. But like Bridgman's stuff is very 2D, and it's his style. Like his stuff doesn't look like a person; it looks like a Bridgman drawing. So that was great for him. But I mean, for the actual purpose of studying form, like what you're doing is, if you were to do a 3D sculpt of a Bridgman drawing, you're sculpting now an interpretation of someone. Like what he did is what you should be doing, which is he interpreted real life. So you should interpret real life and then figure that out, and then it'll come up with your own style. So I wouldn't copy something like that. Like I say, Anatomy for Sculptors would be what I recommend. And you could also find some I mean, Anatomy for Sculptors is good because there's breakdowns, and also you can do some turns. That's what you need with 3D, right? Is like turns. So you can get photo references. They sell them on ArtStation and stuff, where they put the model on like a turntable, and then they'll take pictures and then turn them. So that's cool. You could also look at 3D scans. I've done that. Like I've downloaded 3D scan samples and then opened it in ZBrush and just looked at it. So I could see like, what does it look like, you know, with this material and with this camera, you know, what does an actual real thing look like? And then you could turn it from different angles and you realize, oh, that's what nostrils look like. And like, oh, that's the angle of a brow. And like, I've been wrong, you know? So that stuff helps a lot more than 2D.
Yep.
You can love Bridgman, okay? He's okay.
Bridgman is the best artist of all time.
I mean, think about that. Just I'll give him the nod of respect that he accomplished. That a lot of people love him, and he just did, like he turned studies and teaching into a legacy. Like not a lot of people having some finished Bridgman paintings on their walls. You know what I mean? Like the dude just drew half finished studies that's the bulk of his work, and people love it. So that's how strong he is in like brushstroke and gesture, is that people idolize. It's like practicing. I mean, he made practicing look so good that artists love it. So that's an accomplishment. I think he also did them like 10 feet tall sometimes.
Oh yeah. I read somewhere that he had a 3-foot long charcoal stick, or 3-foot long stick with a piece of charcoal tied to the end.
He'd do it in auditoriums, right? And he would draw in
Yeah,
front of everybody.
And apparently he was very mean to people. But
well,
I don't know that for sure, but that's what I've heard, is that he was very strict. Yeah.
All right, I should probably pull out some fingers here pretty soon, huh?
Yeah.
Actually make a hand.
Ready for the next question?
Sure.
So this is more career oriented. It's from Kitten. They say, "Hi Jay, I've always been fascinated by the idea of working from home whilst earning industry level salaries. Is it a good idea to have a go at freelancing straight after graduating, or rather do my best to get industry connections while at school and work for a few years in the industry before that?"
You know, I feel like my answer would have been different a couple years ago, but now with COVID, I mean, it's proved that people can work from home. I want to work from home too. I've got a new, child, and
Congrats.
actually kind of worked out. Thank you, man. Yeah, in a way, I feel lucky, that we stayed healthy, fortunately, and but then instead of commuting, she was born and then came home and we took care of her, and now I can't even imagine the other way. So that was a plus. And I'm not freelancing, obviously. So I've spoken to other people that work at other companies too, and there's an ongoing conversation now in the industry, in a lot of different studios, of like, do people need to come in? Like, you know what I mean? Like my studio has hired people from out of state, which they never would have done before COVID. But like I say, we had to figure out, everyone had to figure out working from home. It's not,
Right.
now you have all these different opportunities. And if companies embrace that, they've just got a whole world's wealth of talent now. It's so much different, you know? You could hire people from different countries now, maybe different states, different states at least.
Well,
So, yeah, I
so
think you might be able to work from home. But freelancing specifically, I can't really speak to that, but that's kind of a concern. Freelancing is a lot harder than people think. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure we have a mutual friend who works at Turtle Rock. Do you work with Brent Griffith by chance?
I don't work directly with him,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah,
yes, I know him. Yes.
yeah, he's a friend of mine. And, I
Cool.
was told that he hasn't met, like he's been working remotely pretty much all, for the past 6 months or something, and actually hasn't met you guys. And it's like you know,
Oh,
I'm
maybe
not
he's
sure.
not. Maybe he's not who I'm thinking of because that name's super familiar. But I think I saw him in person.
He is a texture artist. Um,
Hmm.
we might be thinking of two different people, but
Maybe.
I know he knows Mike Raynard.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
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 So,
That's a trip though, not knowing everybody, or just like not
yeah,
meeting
yeah,
them. I mean, I guess he will meet them, but
yeah, at some point. Right, right.
yeah, we have an employee. We worked with her before, but she moved back to her home in Australia, and we rehired her now. So she like is in Australia, working. That's freaking cool, man.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Um,
crazy. Like her time zone is so different that like when we're asleep, she's working.
yeah. It's like 12 hours ahead or something.
Yeah, I mean that's just so cool. So I think that's the future. So if you want to
Yeah.
work from home, that's it. Also, with kind of to what you were saying, because you were talking about, earning salary and trying to like, um, capitalize on that. And I do think that there is a portion of that going on right now that people are like moving to places. Obviously, we hear about Texas, but moving to different places, and then getting remote work in places that pay more. So I don't know how long that's gonna last, but that is a thing that people are trying to
Yeah.
do.
Well, so the next part of this person's question is, I'd love to eventually move on to being a more indie developer, as I personally think that the graphics is the hardest thing to get good at, which is why I made a focal point in my career. So becoming an independent artist is definitely my end goal. I just wonder how early I should start developing that independence.
I guess the sooner the better, but it could be it's gonna be a grind and everything. Just know that. I mean, it kind of depends on your situation. If you can float it, yeah, why not do it? It's kind of
Yeah,
different too, because like let's say there's someone like Ross Tran from Ross Draws, right? So he goes to Art Center, which is tough to get in, and then he's pretty good at Art Center, which is a hard place to get by, right? So and he's learning some stuff, and then when he goes out, he tries his own thing, and he dedicates like a lot of time and everything. Maybe he's living at his parents' house when he starts, probably, and then but he's already pretty good, and he has a thing like he's like in terms of like when you're as an artist, sometimes you have to figure out like what you want to do, what's important to you and what you want to make, and that doesn't. I don't know if that's come to me yet, but I'm a lot closer to it than I was when I was his age. So I think he was really accomplished for his age. He had a thing. He knew what he liked. Made images that people liked and turned that into something. Well, and he's hustling and everything. So I really respect him
yeah,
and I love looking at him for what he did. And then there's other people that are kind of like getting better in front of people. They've got that dedication, they've got that hustle, but they don't have that level of creating art yet. And so those are the two different ways you could go. If you're someone who can sell your art already, then you might be able to make an independent art thing off this, going to the conventions, selling prints, selling things, as well as like just being online and making stuff and just trying to make that your whole thing. But if you don't have that level yet, just streaming, just being online, that's not going to work. You know, people aren't going to just follow you just because you're online. So then your angle would have to be a little bit different. Like you're just growing in front of people. Like I think Ergo Josh is pretty good, but that's very much his vibe. Is he's makes really high quality videos and streams. He's got a great radio voice. That maybe that helps too. But then he has good information for people, and then he's just dedicated his life to getting better at art. That's obvious, and so he makes art and streams of him practicing and talking about that. So he creates a good vibe, and he's kind of upfront that like he thinks he's not that good yet, and he's wants to get better, and he's kind of just documenting it in front of people, which is cool. So those are kind of examples of the two different ways that you might want to look at if you want to be an independent artist. But it's going to be be hard.
And I think, it's really two different paths. And like, I hear a lot of people cite Stardew Valley as one of the, indie game success stories, where the guy who developed Stardew Valley was working at a coffee shop for about 5 or 6 years and spending his free time making Stardew Valley just all on his own. And, it was probably pretty difficult at times, and it's like, it's obviously not the most, like it's not like a AAA game with extremely rendered 3D models and all that kind of stuff. But Stardew Valley is one of the most successful games in the past, 10 years or so.
Wow. Awesome. I don't know anything about that. And my bad if the question was the question about being an independent game developer?
The first part of that, I'd like to eventually move on to be an indie developer.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you gotta get some experience doing some programming and stuff. That's what I would think.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do it with Unreal, doing the blueprints and stuff. But
the tools are getting so powerful now. It's like Unreal and Unity, all that stuff. anyone can make a game now. It's just a matter of the thing that I've seen with doing studio work is that to work at a studio, you generally have to be very specialized. You have to know one part of the pipeline really well. Whereas being an indie developer, you might have to learn how to program and model and do concept art and do story and do all these different, and marketing. But you're not a master of it in the same way that somebody who's only ever doing a single thing at a studio is.
Mm-hmm.
For
sure.
And it definitely depends on the goals of the person, and all that kind of stuff. So
I do think that art this is changing, but it has always been the case that art takes a huge backseat to indie game development. That is getting better now for a bunch of reasons, but also like things like metahumans and the scan library. If you're going the Unreal route, that's what that's for. It's like, hey, you want to be an indie developer? Well, now you can use photorealistic stuff. But I've always looked at things like as an artist, right? I might think, like I mentioned Gears of War or something, like, oh, that looks badass, But this is a huge mistake that people, even now, if I go out and like have drinks with friends, they'll be like, dude, we should make a game. And it's like, okay, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to make a third-person action adventure shooter like Uncharted or something. You're like, dude, are you insane?
That's crazy.
Like, that stuff takes like 1,000 talented people and 5 years and millions of dollars. So I love thinking I love all of Genova Chen's games from that game company. He made like Flow, and the newest one is Cloud, and he made Journey. So those are beautiful games that are also small in scope but effective. I love Limbo. Limbo's a great game. That's something that a very small amount of people could have made. But then you have an example like Minecraft, where I think one dude made that, and that's all programming. So like it depends on what you're doing. You could do a game like Limbo in Unity or Unreal, and you wouldn't need that much programming experience, I don't think. I'm kind of speaking out of school though. But those are examples of games I think that are like great, and I would consider Limbo a good looking game. But you can see what I mean, like how the art, you kind of have to choose, like you have to be strategic And definitely don't, like, as soon as you start thinking about like, I'm gonna make an indie game with characters that like, are gonna have speeches and they have hair, and like I want to have custom armor or whatever, all those things. No, it's too much. It's crazy. So you have to think of something that is appealing, but is achievable. So
Yeah,
that's why I always think about Limbo, because I don't think when people see Limbo, I don't think they think, oh, it's a cop out. But I mean, it's black and white, it's 2D, it's graphic, but it's such a good strong style. They did such a good job that it still
Other
feels
example of that too.
beautiful. What's that?
Cuphead.
Yeah, Cuphead's beautiful. Yeah, that seems like that'd be hard to do. So they crushed that.
Oh yeah.
That's got to be the best. I don't know what you'd call that, the like fake retro or whatever, like looking like film and everything. I mean, it's amazing what they did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think another reality of this stuff is like something like League of Legends started out as a Warcraft 3 mod, and it's obviously grown into this giant thing. But like when you look at something like a Call of Duty or Apex Legends or any of that kind of stuff, you're looking at the end result of like 20 years of development on the genre of the FPS. Like
Exactly.
everything starts out as an indie thing. Like Quake is, or like Doom.
Quake.
Yeah. Those things are like super simple. It's like, or the original like Wolfenstein stuff. But obviously FPSs have shifted from being something that's kind of simple to being like something that does take like 1,000 people working 12 hours a day to make. It's the whole game development thing has a lot more to do with like doing a lot with little resources rather than trying to make a lot with to trying to be like over ambitious or something, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. Perlux says, "Hey Jay, do you think it is a good idea for 3D artists to go to art school? Of course, when you're not good enough to get a job in the industry, there's not really a reason to go. But for someone who isn't really at that level, it is a good idea. If yes, what are some art schools with 3D courses if the end goal is to work in the game/movie industry?"
Yeah, I would say. Okay, I would say you don't need to go to art school, but it can be helpful. It's a different world today a bit. When I went, I don't think online education was as good and accessible and prevalent and like with really good instructors and stuff. But I met people and got to just speak with other like people that were passionate about it, and so I love my experience, but it was a bit unique. Like a lot of people that went to the same school I went to didn't have the same experience, so I recognize that a little bit fortunate there. So it's not something that you can guarantee. So I would say you don't need school. Degrees don't matter, but they can be beneficial. And if you want to go to school, a physical school, I always recommend Gnomon, because they actually have a high placement rate. They're not just scammy, and they have actual professionals there. And I've been there on hiring trips to get people from there. So in terms of actual physical school, that would be what I would recommend.
Yeah. Well, and in terms of online resources, Jay actually has a YouTube channel where he teaches this stuff, and it's like
Yeah, I do have a YouTube channel. Yeah, and I did make a course on making game characters, which is very much the same workflow I did when I made game characters for Apex Legends. I was working on that game when I made that course. So yeah, and obviously Proko, that's where we're at right now, right? Proko, they do online teaching too. So yeah, that's what I'm saying is you don't need to go, but if you want to go, that's where I'd recommend. And because like you're gonna meet people, which in my case ended up being lifelong relationships. We get each other jobs, we come across each other in the industry, and then also at the school. Like if you went to Gnomon, there's going to be instructors there that are in the industry. You know, you can go talk to someone, you can go ask someone a question that like worked on Uncharted or something, or worked on a Marvel movie, you know, or something like that. And that's really valuable, right? But you have to weigh that because you're going to be paying a lot of money. So make sure you think it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure you've had the same experience where every single art director on a big game or, you know, famous artist or whoever, I've never met anyone that's really cared about a degree. They've never really cared about, you know, they pretty much say the same thing. It's like, go to art school if you can afford it and you have the time, but it's really not necessary to become a professional.
Absolutely. We don't look at it or anything like that. And it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, that it's a meritocracy, you know, like that's what's so great about it, is that it's about your portfolio. You know, people see your portfolio first. That's where they make all the judgments. And then everything else after that, like even your resume, and then including like where you went to school, is all kind of a second thought.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's more of like a water cooler conversation kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, hey, I went to this school. Oh, I went, you know, I know a friend from there. Kind of, it's never that, you know, it's never make or break anything.
Definitely.
Santiago is, I'm butchering her name, but they say, hi, would you recommend doing individual studies of each part, or is it better to do complete bodies when studying anatomy?
Eventually you want to do a full body, but I say start with parts because you can do more of them. You can do it in one session and then you can focus, you know, and then later kind of build it as a whole. But again, it was back to what I'm saying before. Like if, you know, if a student wants to like, I want to get better at anatomy, so I'm going to do a whole body, they can end up working on a whole body for 2 months. You know, and after like a week, I think your relationship to your project gets different, and all of a sudden it's like important and it's got a lot of weight to it. Things kind of like slow down to a halt because you don't want to ruin it now. It's just got too much shit with it. So I think it's better to just, you know, for a while focus on legs, for a while focus on torsos, and then later you can put that stuff together. And that's kind of a different thing, is like proportion, making sure that's good. Obviously, you can do a full body out the gate if you want, but I would just really try to make sure you keep it fast. Like, don't spend more than a week on it, you know, then trash it and start again. That would be the best. That would be my advice. I'm always worried that people are going to pour too much into it. Another common thing that happens is like people study like athletic, zero body fat people for so long that all their characters end up looking like that. And I think that's just not representative. That's not a very broad brush to make characters, you know? You know, my thinking of characters is just think about it. Every character and everything you've ever watched or read, how many of them are, you know, how many of them look like Tyler Durden? You know what I mean? Like, not that many. So anatomy is important so that you can make believable, naturalistic characters. So eventually you have to switch your thinking and make a character, and that's when making a full body and costume and everything becomes important.
Well, I mean, I see this quite a bit in the art education culture community in general, where there's like this idea that the fundamentals are the most important thing to learn, which is, I guess, to a degree, but you know, I think it's more important you're using the fundamentals to learn what you want to say versus doing it just, you know, to do really, really good figure studies or really, really accurate portraits. Like,
absolutely, dude. Well said.
And
that's why you don't like Bridgman too, right? I'm just kidding.
Bridgman's the best. I would have a Bridgman drawing on my wall. I think that would be the coolest thing on the planet. But
like an original?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That'd be super fun, super cool. I've been hanging out. I'm on a road trip right now around the country, and I've been hanging out with a
Ooh, are you in the van right now, dude?
No, I'm at a Montana gallery in our Gallery Montana in Billings, Montana. And I've been hanging out with a bunch of people who went to GCA, the Grand Central Academy, where you know, they do these like 100-hour or like 2 or 3 month graphite figure studies.
Wow.
Completely. It's really cool. I like the romantic. It's very romantic and very but you can't sell a graphite drawing for $3,000 or five or 10,000. You can never sell a graphite study for as much as for as much time it would take to actually justify doing one. And ultimately, that stuff is way more just about becoming comfortable with like value and shape and anatomy rather than that being the final product. And the problem with that stuff is that like once you get that far into a drawing, like you were saying, you become attached to it, and any little mistake becomes like it can ruin the entire drawing. And the process.
I can't imagine, especially graphite, because now you're like putting the paper on your hands so you don't smudge it. Remember that we used to draw, and then you're like you did something that's great, and you go over here and then you smudged it, and you just
it's
so heartbreaking.
Weeks of work just gone, and you're drinking your coffee and you spill it on your
Oh my gosh.
Oh man.
Yeah, I don't miss that stuff about working traditionally, but I will say there is not an equivalent of losing work. Like it's happened, a few times, and where you just lose like a day's worth of work or something. Like it's just gone, and there's like a mourning period where it doesn't make sense. Like you lose power, or your drive fails, or something random happens, and it takes you a while to come to grips with like that's gone forever, and there's nothing I can do about it. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Right. Well, I talked to Scott a lot about this idea where you only have so many like creative hours per day. And if you're really like, it's pretty rare, I think, even for professional artists to be feeling like they're really jamming on something, to feel like they're really flowing on a piece of artwork. And if they're doing that even for like an hour or two, or a day or something, and they lose it, it's like how many productive days like that do you have in your entire life? Like a couple thousand, or 100? I have no idea. And to lose one of those days, it could be pretty demoralizing, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the other thing about just losing art or whatever in general. This is not just about the time, right? It's the like all your insecurities come up, because especially like if you were feeling good about it and everything, now it's like, can I do that again? And
right.
Did I get lucky? Is that it? Am I done? Did I just lose the best thing I've ever made? Whatever.
Well, yeah, I guess something I'd actually want to ask you about personally is like, how do you deal with burnout? How do you deal with like, just potentially being burnt out on art in general? Like, are there other things that you do besides sculpting that keep you kind of grounded and, keep your mental health up?
Yes, I think so. Let's see. Sounds like an important question. Yeah, I don't feel burnout now. I think I'm generally pretty good about not overworking. So I kind of go off feeling, I guess. Like if it feels like work and really grindy, I usually just stop doing it, even like the work I'm paid for. Unless there's a deadline, unless I have to, I usually stop at that point. Or I'll switch, I'll switch tasks to something else that I'm interested in. And once I get focused, I feel okay. So I really try to keep it rare like that. There's that grindy feeling. I think most of us would get it. That like just feeling the on the clock, the like, the discomfort of forcing yourself to do something.
Yeah.
I try to not do that too often unless, it really requires it. So I try to work smarter, not harder. You know what I mean? And then when it comes to other things I do, I exercise pretty much every day.
Yeah.
I try to eat pretty good throughout the week. And and I have thought about all this as it relates to my art. That's the thing. Once art's your life, it's like a sickness, Like everything I do, I think a reason that I'm doing it is because it makes the time that I'm in the chair doing work more comfortable, more doable, more sustainable. So I'm not like an athlete or anything, but I'm the opposite. I sit in a chair and I draw like, fantasy characters, but I try to have a healthy, mind and lifestyle outside of the chair so that I can, so that I can kind of earn doing this. Cause I used to, when I moved out, like I would just, I eat like crap, like drink beers, on a Wednesday or something. And I was this like thinking, oh yeah, I could just do whatever I want. And, it got like unhealthy and it wasn't good just sitting all the time, not doing anything. And so I've been there, and I learned through experience that it's important to maintain a healthy lifestyle separately, and that makes this more doable. And then also I feel like, my own personal experiences, I had a big change with when my daughter was born. There's and this is similar to exercise in a way, although I have exercise in addition to that. But when I'm spending time with her, it's more about her. You kind of focus everything about that. And then there are difficult times being a parent, just like challenges. And so in a way, you hear a lot of new parents say it, that your perspective on life changes. So it made doing this a lot less important and a lot less challenging. So,
Right.
so that's kind of what happened to me. So I just do this at night. A couple hours a night. I try to do it at least 2 hours. And then after 2 hours, and sometimes it's an hour and a half, I'll go make some tea, whatever. Again, I'm not forcing myself. I have 2 hours set aside at night. The family's asleep. And then after 2 hours, then I'll put something on, Netflix or a movie that I like or whatever, or a podcast. And then I'll just keep going, usually, if I feel like it. So again, like I'm keeping it loose and I'm not trying to feel like I'm forcing myself. I just so another way of saying it is the shorter way of saying it is, over time, I've refined a lifestyle that supports what I want to do. So I've just got, time throughout the day dedicated to the things that create my whole day, where like I can do this long term, and I don't feel bad about it. I'm at a comfortable level with everything, and that took that just took some time iterating.
Right.
So
Yeah, and
that's your question.
Well, I think a big part of it is being like non-judgmental to where you're spending your time, and having, it's like knowing that you could potentially be a much, much better artist, but knowing that there are things that you actually value more in your life than, feeling good and exercise and spending time with your family, and that being something that you value and making a proper time for it.
Yeah, that's an important point, actually. A couple things you said. One is, I do think a lot of times when I hear artists talk about burnout, that it's self-imposed. That's kind of why I was mentioning the like my take on it was how I created my day to feel okay with it. A lot of times burnout is self-imposed. Maybe all the time. There's very few cases, unless you're working on Red Dead Redemption or a Naughty Dog game, gotcha. Then you kind of aren't forced to work a lot. But like you say, like artists have a lot of things going on. I mean, everybody, right? People have a lot of things going on in their brains about ego and feeling secure and feeling like accomplished and self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So a lot of times people deal with it by making themselves work uncomfortably long because they think they deserve that for whatever reason. And that's not true. I think you mentioned talking to Scott, right? And AJ, I know is another person. Anthony Jones talks about this a lot too. But I do believe I subscribe to the thinking that people have about 4 good hours a day of like creative output. So you could kind of structure your day though in a productive way where you are doing the thing, like say it's drawing or painting or sculpting, and you're doing that for about 4 hours a day. And then the other time of the day, you can do the other things we mentioned. You could exercise, spend time with family. You could write. You could, plan stuff. You could, you could clean your office. There's a lot of things you could do that is still productive, without, making yourself do more. And if you can do more and feel good, definitely do that. But I can tell you from experience that, like, your 7th hour, your 8th hour, you're not as sharp. You're not making as good of decisions, and you're not making as good of work. So it's, is it worth it? I think that's the smarter, not harder thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
another thing I'll say is I have had the thought multiple times, like, I could be better if I didn't screw around in my 20s so much, but I don't regret where I'm at right now. And, in a way, I think all those experiences, right, kind of culminated to here. So I don't regret it. It's just that's how it worked out. So in a way, people compare themselves by age, like if you're 30 and there's a 20-year-old that's way better than you, you're kind of comparing yourself to them. But it's important to realize, like, everyone's on their own timeline, and being an artist should be kind of a life's pursuit. It's just like it's a lifestyle and it's also, what I love about it is it's so personal. It's similar to exercise, that you are in a race with yourself. So as long as you are, and so you shouldn't beat yourself up. You should treat yourself right. And as long as you're making a little bit of progress each day, staying on track, doing it for the right reasons, doing art to be better at art, to feel more fulfilled, to be creative and get those experiences and feelings that people that aren't creative, aren't getting because of whatever reason they're not doing it, then that's it. Then it's kind of something you can build into your life for the long term. I think the sprinting thing, or the burnout thing, it could be like sprinting, getting burned out, take a break. Sprinting, getting burned out, take a break. But what if you just, tortoise in the haired it, and you just, like, did 4 hours of good work every day forever? It might be okay.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's, I see a lot of people feeling like they have to become, they just got out of high school and they only have enough runway for 2 years for art school or to train or something. And they feel like they have to get the skills in 2 years to actually start, living. So they do the crazy grind and burn out and stuff. But I totally understand why people do that. But at the same time, it's almost like it almost sets yourself up more for failure if you just spend all your time doing it from the start, versus, like, if you're working at Starbucks and then, or as a waiter or something, and doing art at night on your free time when you really want to be doing it, that over 5 years is actually going to be a lot better practice than 2 years of just going really, really hard, and not really giving yourself a recover.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. I'm going to ask you this question. I think I have an idea what your answer is going to be, but I'm curious what it's going to be. Ibrahim says, I'm passionate about making 3D models, games, animation, 3D printing, and selling them online. How likely is it that my work is safe online? What if somebody infringes and uses my work in their projects? For example, I see one of my 3D models in YouTube videos. Can I send them a copyright strike? Do copyrights work effectively for 3D?
Yeah, if you put your work online, it's gone, dude. I mean, that's kind of what I think.
Yeah. That's the answer I thought you'd say.
Yeah, dude. So what was he saying? He was saying 3D models,
yeah,
you can download them. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. If you have 3D models, Yeah, it's gone, dude. I mean, like I tell people, don't put, if they don't want their stuff stolen, don't put it in any 3D viewer like Sketchfab or anything. The 3D models I made for Evolve got ripped. You know, there's just like a lot of black markety Asian like websites that just sell models. And it's so easy to share is another thing. You know, like say you were to sell it on Gumroad, you know, like one person could buy it and then just put it on whatever else. So that's just kind of how it is. Selling 3D models doesn't seem lucrative to me. Selling physical models, like if you 3D print them and then make molds and stuff, that's something. Physical prints. You see a lot of digital artists selling physical goods. That's why digital goods just don't last. When it comes to video tutorials too, now a lot of people, you know, Gumroad put in a streaming ability so that people don't download the videos. I'm sure Proko's got a whole thing going so that people don't steal his videos. So you try to make it a little bit difficult because piracy is huge online. Well, it's like the thing.
My build, so it's actually pretty easy to steal the Proko videos. Like once you buy them once, you could download them and you own them forever. You could distribute them and your account around and stuff.
That's cool.
Well, my belief on all this stuff.
Not cool that you could steal, but that's cool that you could download them. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's like it almost encourages people to steal it in a sense and share it around. And I'm not saying it's necessarily good, but it's also like, you know, like you were saying before, once you put something online, it's no longer yours. Like,
yeah.
Like I would say if you're worried about people stealing your sculptures, you should change. Like there's going to be no sculpture that you do that's going to make or break your career, you know, which can be like, you're never going to have a magnum opus piece of artwork that's going to make you $1 trillion and, you know, make people realize that you're an amazing artist. It's all about loving the process of it and continuing to make good work, I think.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Well said.
You know, yeah. In the case of people stealing your artwork, like even if you're a 2D artist or 3D artist or whatever, people are going to be doing that no matter what. It's part of that.
Yep. I mean, you can ask them. You can ask them to stop, but if they don't, it's like, what are you going to do? You know.
Yeah.
It's just they're being dicks.
Yeah. Sign your work, probably. That's probably a good thing to do.
Put a watermark.
Yeah. Mark in there. This is a good question. Smash32 says, "Hi Jay, I really love your work and working to become a 3D artist. Any tips for getting a first job as a 3D artist if you live outside the US?"
Oh, yeah, I've had this question before. Oh. Okay, let me try to answer. So this is hard to answer because it changes a lot. Laws change a lot, and also COVID's a thing. I don't know, is that a thing, you know? So I don't know. But depends on the country you're in. And so I'll first talk about this part. The country part. I don't know what country you're in, but like, you know, it was hard before, but then the Trump administration made it more difficult. I don't know the ins and outs, but it has to do with visas and stuff. So like 15, 20 years ago, it was a bit easier. There might have even been incentives. So like companies like Blizzard, they hired all these talented people from like the Polycount forums and the online culture at that time from like all over, you know? So when I would meet up with people at Blizzard, when I worked near them, you know, it would be like guy from Belgium, guy from France, guy from Germany, you know, guy from Canada. It's crazy. They were hiring just talented people. Didn't matter where they were from. And then that became more difficult. So companies are just not incentivized. So it just costs money. And so if they can hire locally, they will, and blah, blah, blah. So if you're really good, a company will figure it out. But that's obviously, you know, kind of unlikely. But if you're really good, you know, I think about people like Jama, who was in a small country. I don't even remember the name of it. And he got so good that obviously, you know, he worked on Marvel movies and stuff. At least I think he did. He worked on great movies and big projects, and he's a great artist. So the other route, the more like realistic route, I would say something that, I did too, even though I'm in this country and everything. But I took jobs when I was starting out. I was thinking probably similar to how you're thinking, and I was thinking like, how do I get a job at Naughty Dog, and how do I get a job at Blizzard, and I want to work at Weta and all that stuff. There's like 3 or 4 places that you want to work, and they're all like the biggest stuff because you know them because they're they're like household names. But it's more important to think if you want to 3D model, like if you just don't want another type of job, and you're just like, if you can simplify it down to, if I can pay my bills by 3D modeling and feel comfortable, that's the win. So then you can be a lot more creative and have a lot less rules, So maybe you can have a couple different revenue sources online that are small, and then maybe you can get a job locally or in your country, or maybe remote in your country, that like works at an advertising thing or a mobile game company or whatever. So like my first 2 jobs were on small stuff at studios that nobody's ever heard of. But that gave me enough money to move out. I was living on my own. I bought a car. And I remember thinking I bought a big TV. I did all the stuff you would do when you're young. I spent it on computers and TVs and shit, and video games and junk food. But I thought that was cool. I was like, I'm making enough money modeling that I can live, and I thought that was great, better than being a waiter, because being a waiter sucked. So that's kind of the more realistic way to think about it. If you can just if you can figure out how to make enough money 3D modeling, then you got to win, and then you can start like stepping up from there. I think that's more realistic than the other way of thinking about it, which is like, if you just get so dope it doesn't matter, then someone's going to figure out how to hire you. But you can always work on getting super dope while you're getting paid. So just don't think you're above any kind of job. Obviously, if it sucks there, just ditch it. But I worked on like casino games. I worked on just a bunch of shit that got canceled. I think the first 6 years of my career, I think it was 6 years, I remember talking to somebody about it, that I looked into it, and I realized that for the first 6 years of my career, no 3D model that I ever made was shipped. It never made it into anything. And I didn't put it in my portfolio. So I was just being paid to 3D model, and then there was essentially just being deleted, for one reason or another. Projects falling through, switching studios, whatever. And that was just the business, But and that could drive you a little bit crazy, but I would just like make sure that I'm making stuff that satisfies me too. So you're kind of like 3D modeling and getting paid for it, which is funding your lifestyle of 3D modeling what you want. And another way I looked at it was like, used to be I was a waiter, and then I went to school, and then I would do some art, like, in the evening hours to get better. And then now all of a sudden I'm being paid to 3D model 8 hours a day. And then when I come home, if I do art, like now all of a sudden I'm like tripling the amount of time that I'm doing it. So I'm getting better, and I'm getting paid to get better. And that's what really feels like the win, is like you're being sponsored to 3D model. So a lot of times people think if they're not doing their dream job or like working on like the best project in the world, that it's not what they want. But you can still think of the positives, and you can figure out how to turn that into just growing as an artist. And I just think getting paid to 3D model in general should be the goal.
Right. Well, and I've talked to a bunch of people about this, about the idea of like even just being being a rock star right out the gate and getting your dream job when you're 20 is potentially dangerous, because if you're being flown out from Belgium or France or the Middle East or China, wherever, to work at Riot or Blizzard or the rock star jobs, you have a tremendous amount of pressure on you, and maybe you actually don't want to be delivering at that level that young. It's a lot of pressure, and it's really stressful. And, it might actually cause more burnout than more burnout. Yeah,
it might, especially because younger people might not be as equipped to deal with those kinds of like feelings and pressures.
Right.
Like all of a sudden it's like 0 to 100, you know?
Yeah. And like every artist that I really admire now, a lot of them started out exactly the way that you were describing, where it's like not necessarily being rock stars right out the gate, but they were consistently just doing small projects and eventually growing to the point to where they're working on big movies. And you know, it's like whether it's drama or I don't know how drama started, but I suspect it wasn't working on Star Wars right away.
Yeah,
You know?
probably not. Exactly.
Yeah. And or Drew Struzan is probably like Simon Lee even. You know, it's
Yep, Simon Lee. Yep. Oh, Simon Lee
Simon,
got his start when he's like in his 40s or something.
yeah.
So he was just sculpting by himself for fun for all that time. He was a web developer.
Yeah.
The underside of his hand doesn't matter as much, but whatever. I'm
good looking.
Little pinch earth.
Wow.
I just call it done. Just say little pinch your hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can feel you about being in different countries. I mean, I had a friend that was from New Zealand, and even that was hard.
Oh yeah.
The whole country thing, it's a whole nother can of worms. And I know a lot of people want to come to the US and everything too, but it's messy. But like I say, the COVID thing is such a curveball. Let's see what that means for everyone. I don't know what that means, honestly. I think the world has changed.
Yeah. But I guess going back to the idea, like, even though it's harder to get a job in an American company if you're not in the United States, it's never been easier relative to, with all the education that's online now. It's even if you're somewhere where you have no art influence at all, no art teachers or anything, if you just go on YouTube, you can find more content that you would ever even be able to watch.
Yes. Yeah, you can always be working on yourself. You can always be working on it.
Yeah. Let's see.
All right. Pull out some more fingers, maybe.
Let's see.
Do we answer the world's questions?
I'm a lot of them are a lot about learning anatomy, so I'm trying to find
Haha.
idea of. If you want to talk more about learning anatomy, it's tons of people asking you about that.
I mean, learning anatomy is just doing it, and I think like I mentioned before, I think people just don't want to do that or hear that. It sounds boring, but that's what it is.
Have you done crochets before?
I have not. Did I? I have not. No, but it would be beneficial. I have kind of a different feeling on. I think you mentioned it before. Like art students have a tendency of over valuing anatomy, and I think it comes from people like saying like anatomy is important. Anatomy is important. Anatomy is important. It's important to understand enough about why people and creatures look the way they do so that you can modify or create them and people will believe it. But I kind of steered the other way almost because there was so much, like I thought it could be a distraction. I thought you could get too into it. So like I'm someone who doesn't think you need to know the names of the muscles, for instance. Like would it help? Maybe. Probably. But I just have my eyes always been on making characters, you know? So I just wanted to get there. So I kind of thought, I think of anatomy as something I need to be able to do to accomplish this trick, you know? Like my goal isn't to be an expert on anatomy. My goal is to make believable characters. So I need to practice it and be able to like do that trick, you know? But do I need to like make all the muscles inside of a thing and then put a skin on it? No. That would be a useful exercise if you wanted to do it. I would not talk anyone out of doing it. But I'm just saying for my own sake, that's why I didn't do it. I just thought if I could be spending time making characters, then I would be doing that. And yeah, so I also am not too good with words, and you know, I'm a lot more visual. So that's why I like the Anatomy for Sculptors book, is it shows you, it also breaks things down into primitive shapes, which again, I like to do. I like to think of things I like to simplify things. Whereas you could, if you're not too careful, overcomplicate anatomy by thinking about all the, you know, because you take the skin off and you look at those crochet stuff, it's like super crazy. But you can see I've got anatomy figures behind me. I've got a skull right here. And so when I'm doing stuff and it's important, I'll bring it over and I'll look at reference. I'm always looking at reference. So that's how I use it. So yeah, definitely practice it. Get comfortable with it. It's good to do. But then also don't lose sight of why anatomy is important in the first place. Why do people say it's important? It's important because if you don't do it right, people say this character looks weird, and then that ruins anything you're trying to do. So that's really all you're trying to get over is like, does your character look good? Perfect.
Right. I'm going to ask you one question, and I'm going to go get my laptop charger real quick.
Yep.
What are the advantages of sculpting a hand from scratch in ZBrush rather than building a basic shape in Maya and importing it into ZBrush?
Cool. Yeah, I can ramble about that for a while. It's a bit harder, and it forces you to do things that you wouldn't do if you had a base mesh. So it's kind of like it's kind of like working without the net. You know what I mean? If I was in a production setting, or if I had to, not that this would happen, but if you had to sculpt a hand for like a product and it was important or whatever, then I would do it. I would probably turn this into a base mesh, which I could. I could use the Z remesher, and in some of the hand studies I do that, so that I could sculpt with subdivisions. But starting with a sphere is something I do in my practicing because it forces me to start from scratch and start to think about shapes and manipulate the forms in a way that I don't do when I'm sculpting on base meshes. You know what I'm saying? So that's like a part of modeling that I wouldn't have as much experience on if I was only using base meshes. Like I made a base mesh of a hand, so I could just use that every time. But then now the part of like turning a sphere into a hand and like thinking about the shape and like the size of the fingers and how they relate and like where the knuckles would go and how I would pose each one and how I would pull out the mesh without it sticking together and blah, blah, blah. There's like lots of things that I am now forced to do by starting with a sphere. So I think it makes better practice, even though it's not like efficient or whatever. It's not the smartest thing to do, but I think it's really good practice. It makes it more difficult. And it makes me, have to think about some more stuff and do some more stuff. So I think it's good for me. It's good for you. That's why. Nice.
It's like eating your vegetables.
Yes.
Or
eat your vegetables.
Yeah, eat some broccoli sometimes. Do you think eating vegetables makes you a better artist?
I am a vegan, so I guess I do think that.
It probably does.
I think eating plants are good for you. I do think that.
What are your opinions on online schools like CG Spectrum?
I don't know anything about CG Spectrum really, so I can't speak to that one. Online schools? Is that what they said? Online schools?
Yeah. I guess it's just online schools in general.
Yeah, I don't know. Look into it. There's going to be more and more. We were just kind of talking about this. There's going to be more and more about them. So yeah, I mean, here's what I think. I think online education is great. I think the internet is great. It creates opportunities that wouldn't have been possible, and some of that is like being able, like, say you were in another country, you could study with an instructor that you chose, that you think is really talented. You want to learn from them, and you don't have to be in the same location. That's huge right there. That's the recipe right there. You know, like when I went to school, I drive there, and then I didn't choose the instructor, you know, and then and I had to take classes that I didn't want to take. So it's kind of dumb, and they took my money. So that's how that worked. But then, like, online school is more like, you know, I wanted to learn a little bit about oil painting, and then I took a class from Sean Cheatham, who's an accomplished oil painter, and he taught the class. So I like gave him money with some other people, and then he taught us oil painting. So it's very direct, very pure. It's good. It was good, and it was a really good vibe and experience. Like, I've also taught some classes at brick and mortar schools where people are on a track, and some of them don't want to be in there, and so it's a weird thing. But the simple recipe of like, hey, I want to learn from this person, and I can do that. Boom, that's it. When it comes to like schools, I don't know. You know, is there an instructor there that you want to learn from? Do they have a high placement rate? Those would be the things I'm looking at. But to me, the simplest form is just like, if you want to learn from someone specific who's teaching, then you can do that. And that's what's great about online. You can be very specific, and you can learn what you want to learn, and you don't have to go there. So that's really what I like about it. In terms of like the schools, you just have to look into it. But I can tell you it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, if it's not like there's a degree or something that matters. So it only matters what you're going to get out of it. So just make sure you would get what you want to get out of it.
Well, I found that, you know, the art school question is honestly the most common question that I've seen people ask in general. And I think it's like it's strange to see that, because it's like, I think a big part of becoming a professional artist a big chunk of it isn't how good you are. It's how unique your voice is, you know? And I think art school in a lot of ways is counterproductive to developing a unique voice. Because you're doing things that people are telling you to do, and, you know, you're not necessarily problem solving on your own. And pretty much everyone I've talked to that's gone to Art Center or, you know, Art Institute or, you know, some fancy art schools, they were saying, you know, I really enjoyed the classes I took, but what mattered most and what got me my career was the stuff I did in my free time, you know?
Absolutely.
It's like the stuff you were doing by choice, never for classes.
Yes. I've actually thought some about this on why it's so common, that question. And this is just kind of me making this up. So you have experience with teaching now, though, that you are with Proko and everything. So maybe this will resonate a little bit, but similar in a way. People looking for the answers. The people looking for the simple answer, and looking for answers outside of themselves. And I think, you know, I'll say my own experience. I assume it's still like this, but, you know, when I was going through school, they would talk about college, you know, like, gotta go to college, gotta go to college, gotta go to college. Need to get a career, gotta go to a good school. Parents need to be proud of you, need to get a degree. You know, that's all you hear. And parents don't like the idea of their children saying, like, I'm going to be an artist, you know, because that they worry about their future. Rightly so. And so I think when you're starting to come of that age where you're going to make that decision on where you want to do with the next, maybe the rest of your life, the next 10 years or something, you know, it doesn't come natural for you to say, like, well, I'm just going to take a leap here and invest in myself, and I'm just going to grow myself and see what happens. You know, that sounds probably kind of crazy. Like, my wife is someone she's an attorney. So she did the college track. She got an attorney job. She does her job. Like, it's very the normal structured way. And then mine is very, like, you know, so I can't tell her what's going to happen in a few years, you know? We don't have a retirement plan or a pension or a union or whatever. We're just making money being artists. So I think that doesn't come natural to people, and they've been hearing school is important so much. So I think even without thinking about it, sometimes people think just like a doctor or a lawyer wants to be a doctor or a lawyer, so they go to school, they learn how to be a doctor, they get a degree, and now they're a doctor, right?
Yep.
I think people are kind of searching for the artist version of that,
Oh,
and
yeah,
that
sure.
doesn't exist. It's you actually, it's just 100% you. All the other things are kind of tools, maybe not even tools, but things that will affect your experience in a way, either positive or negative. But ultimately, it's all on you, and all of the mileage, all of the learning comes from being alone, and you're sitting down and you're focusing on making something or digesting something or learning something, and it all happens by yourself,
Well,
so that's something
yeah.
that people aren't used to.
Well, and I think that's accurate. I mean, I was talking to, do you know Brian Mark Taylor, the oil painter guy?
I don't think I may know his work, but it doesn't ring a bell.
He's this well-known painter and sci-fi artist, and we were talking about this thing where it's like art, like people are looking for permission to be creative, and
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
having an art school give you a degree and all this validation and all these tools gives you permission to start trying to make things. And ultimately, it's like you don't need permission to try and make a picture, but people
Absolutely.
feel like they might, or to like do a creative endeavor. And, I think it's good to like get your skills up and like build your confidence. But I think I was talking to another friend about this. His name is Steven Zapata, and he was describing art school, and he was saying that art school is like you get to borrow somebody else's personality and somebody else's, you get to borrow their personality, and you get to have a binary element to being creative, where you have a success and failure rate, and something to measure it by. And whereas like, if you ever want to be a professional artist, I think a bigger step is to give yourself permission to start, trusting yourself and trusting your own vision and how you feel about yourself, ultimately.
Yeah, I couldn't. That's awesome. I couldn't have said that better. That's cool. You guys are already talking about that sort of thing. I love that expression. People are looking for, what is it, an excuse, or looking for
Permission.
Yeah, permission. People are looking for permission to be creative. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Wow. Yeah, that's a very succinct way of saying it. And again, I think this comes from all the baggage of growing up and, all this other shit. I mean, you just gotta, it's another reason why I do these studies and stuff. Like, the longer you do, people can, at least me, right? I can put too much stock into, are you being creative? Are you creative enough? Is what you're making important? Blah, blah, blah. It's not about that. Like, again, so simple to say, so hard to live by. But if you can just create a mode of thinking that's long term, so that you're just doing, then good things will start happening. It's just you're thinking too much and not doing enough, and it's really that simple. Is sitting down and making something is being creative. It doesn't have to be Game of Thrones or some like masterpiece life's work. It'll come to you. And I'm someone who like writes down ideas so I can kind of just get them out of my brain and think, if I'm ever like thinking I don't know what to do, that's that feeling of sitting down and having an empty canvas and being freaked out. I got around that by just starting to write down ideas when I had them, so now I've got too many ideas. You can kind of see once you do that the more you're working, the more you do stuff, you'll start having more ideas that you like more. And some of the old ideas you start deleting, something that you thought was great enough to write down. Looking back on it from however much time has passed, you're like, this is stupid. And then you delete, and then you get rid of that. So that's kind of already evidence enough that like there's no point in like sitting down and thinking, how do I make the best work of my whole life? You know, it's just not about that. It should be a simple, I think it should be a simple just part of your life to just make things every day. You know, I've also heard it be said, I've also heard it be talked about like the difference between creating and consuming. And I think a lot of people, it's inversed, that they do a lot more consuming than creating. Some people do only consuming. And I think you're not having as a fulfilled experience, and you're missing out on something. I think as humans, you know, we just get stuff, we get feelings by creating that feels satisfying, and I think it's just good for you. I think just doing art is good for you, just like I think exercise is good for you.
Absolutely. Well, so something I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, no matter what skill level you're at, what you do every day to get better shouldn't change, even if you're an expert or a beginner. You know, there's this quote from The Art Spirit by Robert Henri. It's like, be a master at whatever level that is. You know, whether you're, you know, like mastery is way more of a mindset of putting in the work and having faith in yourself rather than, you know, doing your magnum opus every day. You know, it's yeah.
Dude, awesome, man. You're like a scholar. You're like an art scholar, dude.
Oh, thank you.
Just like pulling out references and quotes and stuff. I love it. It's awesome, man.
Very kind.
Are you studying to be a particular kind of artist yourself?
I went to the Watts Atelier for a couple years. I wanted to be a concept artist in games, and then I did it for a little while, and I realized working in games really isn't for me. So,
what about it wasn't for you?
Just you know, I realized that the stuff I want to draw and paint is different from the kind of stuff people would pay me to do. You know,
and don't you do a lot of dwarves and dragons or what?
No, and it's like I would rather have I think freedom. Like I like doing that stuff now, but I don't know if I'll like it in 20 years. And I think trying to protect what I want to do is, you know, keep it special is way more meaningful than at least for me, than drawing what other people want to draw. You know.
Oh yeah, isn't that the thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, good for you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Just different paths. So that's the thing about all this stuff, is that there's no, like, I think success in art is the most subjective career on the planet, because like some people say that like Vincent van Gogh is the worst artist of all time, because, you know, he obviously committed suicide and had this very difficult life, but other people could say he's the most successful artist of all time because he was being truly honest to himself. And, you know, and both are correct in both of those statements. You know?
It's actually Beeple is the most successful artist of all time.
Oh yeah. Or George Bridgman is the most successful.
Yeah, Bridgman. Yeah.
But, yeah.
No, I you know what? I think you said something cool where I think a lot of and I keep drifting in and out too, because everyone's relationship with art, I think, is personal. Again, I think it's I recommend it as just being a part of someone's life, just for the rest of your life, doing things that are creative and considering yourself an artist, quote unquote. I think we have this baggage in our culture of labels and people putting down the pencil and doing something that's serious and blah blah blah. So I just think doing art's good for your mind, your soul, and it helps me feel more complete. So I think it's just good for you. And then there's the career, you know, and a lot of times we're getting questions, I think, that are about career. And I often forget that if I do a class, everyone wants to be, you know, paid to do it. And I realized, oh yeah, this is a different thing, you know, and that it just puts a whole nother spin on it. And I think it can muddy the waters. And I know it's almost unfair for me to say, but if something my dad told me, which sounds, you know, I know it sounds really wishy-washy, maybe even kind of cliche, but I found it to be true, where he told me, just if you love doing something, Just keep doing it, and eventually you can be paid to do it. That sounds too simple to be true, but it is. It is generally true, as much as a truism can be. And he loved teaching. He taught public school, so that seems like a much more job. But he
Yeah.
loved teaching, and it worked out. And here's another thing that I was kind of mentioning back on the difference between creative careers and the more traditional on a track career where someone can plan out 30 years. The fact that we go off the beaten path is kind of scary for people because you can't predict the future. But that's where some things are going to happen. Like looking back, if you ask all, and I'm sure you've interviewed or talked to other creatives, everybody's path or life experience has been different, but it led them to where they're at. So in hindsight, we can go back and we can talk about like this happened and this happened and this happened. So that's why I'm here. But you can never see the things that were coming up, and so there's still a future where I don't know what's going to happen. And so it looks like it's just working out. That's kind of how it feels. It's like, oh, an opportunity has come up. Okay. But the whole thing the thing that's constant that you can control is the just working on your craft. And the better that you get, one of the earliest questions we had in the stream was about, is learning sophomore more important? Like, what should I do? And it really is as simple as if you can drill down on what you want to be great at, and you really got to drill down, being a jack of all trades is a different thing. If you can really just work on your craft, then things can happen. Things are going to happen. We just can't, nobody can tell you what it's going to happen. You just got to kind of have to have an open attitude and just move forward, and then just take opportunities as they come and weigh them whether or not you want to do it. And then every day you're working on the craft. And then nobody, like I say, that's what's scary is we can't say what's going to happen, but something will happen.
Well, but I think that there's like a narrative sense to all this stuff. Some part of the hero's journey that we all kind of participate in. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Well, like the idea of like walking into the woods or walking into the forest, or or like when Luke goes into the cave when he's being trained by Yoda in Star Wars. It's like that stuff is definitely applicable to everyone's lives, where if you just go and do scary things that are ultimately good for you, and you do like put yourself out there, and like for you, I'd imagine like starting a YouTube channel is really scary, and just putting yourself out there is just really a very unknown thing. And the fact that you've been doing it, like you have 50,000 subscribers now, right? And it's like you never would have even predicted that would ever happen, and you're rewarded. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you. No, first of all, thank you for bringing up Star Wars. It only took us an hour and 45 minutes. I'm surprised it took that long. And then also, that's really interesting how you brought it back to that. And that, I think that's an astute observation, because that same mindset that we're talking about is why I started a YouTube channel. I thought, I kind of like teaching. I haven't done it that much, but my parents were teachers. I know teaching it forces you to be better at the thing you're teaching. Like you are going to be more consumed, and you're just going to level up at the thing, because you have to answer questions. You have to come up with you have to figure out how to communicate it with words now. So it's a way to continue to grow for myself. It's a way to get experience teaching and start to become a better teacher, and a way to create content that I wish I had at the earlier part of my journey, that I can hopefully, give some useful stuff to people that are on similar journeys. And so I knew all of that stuff to be true. And then it was just about, okay, well, I'm just going to make videos then with that attitude. And then we'll see what happens. It's that let's see what happens thing. It's the recipe of, figuring out your kind of what you want to put out there, or the goals doesn't sound like the right word, but like setting yourself out in a direction, and then getting yourself ready, and then just taking those steps, and then things happen. You like the thing we're on right now, this stream right now. Could have never predicted this. This wasn't on like a to-do list. It was just because I put videos out there. Somebody saw it, they recommended me, and then now we're here talking about this. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great metaphor for what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, just having faith in yourself. And like a big part of this, I really believe, is your like people's self-esteem or just how they feel about themselves in general, where like you, like, again, I think the danger of being a student forever is that you stop trusting your own voice. You stop trusting, your own ability to contribute something, because if you're constantly being, just a student and being taught by only teachers, then you're never in a place where you feel like you can actually add something to the greater whole. And like for you, you've been,
Yes.
I mean, I'd imagine you've been doing art for well over 10 years, right?
Yeah, well over 10 years. Yeah.
And it's like, you have a doctorate plus, if in terms of actual studying and education in art, and to say you couldn't contribute something is, I think that's ridiculous. It's like like knowing that if you did make a YouTube channel, that people would actually watch it. If you did, try and apply at a game company, people would actually, they would actually hire you. And I think becoming a professional has a lot more to do with that kind of stuff, and like actually putting in the work and doing it authentically and telling the truth, than like just trying to fake it until you make it.
For sure. And I get that you might not have a truth yet, and that might be when you fake it so you can make it, but that's where those jobs, those like crappy seems like a strong word, but the jobs that weren't your first choice, but still they're going to pay you to do the thing, and then maybe you can get paid on your way to mastering your craft, and I don't know if it ever ends. I don't know if we're ever going to be masters, but
Yeah.
But getting better at it, getting that mileage, getting that experience, so valuable. And at the same time, just getting enough money to sustain your life, and that could be more achievable to eventually lead to.
I think that's more reasonable to ask for than being a master. I think, like, if you only ever want to be a master, it's coming from a place of an ego that might not be, well intentioned. And
yeah, that's true.
And like I'm sure your daughter, your daughter means a lot more to you than art now. It's
yes.
like you still care about art.
That's yeah. That might be a little bit of what happened. I think art was probably too important to me.
Yeah.
And especially in my 20s, it was kind of part of why I avoided it. In a way, it was like kind of scary or something. I think it just built it up too much, and that I was less happy in my 20s, or my early 20s especially. I wasn't good and confident enough, so I would be like taking work home with me, and like I couldn't stop thinking about it, and sometimes I would work more than 8 hours. I wasn't producing like stuff that I was content with, so it was kind of a struggle. And then I wasn't doing personal work, so that was kind of the unhappiest time, where it was much more of a job, it was more of a grind. And then eventually I worked through it, where I definitely got experience on the job, just because I was putting hours in, obviously. But getting to a point where I was more comfortable and confident with my skills and workflow, it started to make it easier on my mind. And then so it would be less of a challenge for me to make better work than I used to be able to make. So then stuff started getting a little bit more reasonable, and then I found the joy in personal work again, and also making those videos on YouTube it gave me purpose to, like, okay, I'm gonna make something to share. I'm gonna make this thing. I can at least share something useful for other people, and that became a reward in itself, where I didn't have to sit down and make a Mona Lisa. I just had to sit down and make something that was useful for people that were interested in the things I'm interested in. So that stuff helped me, move on to a track where now I feel comfortable in both professional and personal life, and it's much less important. Yeah, my daughter super helps give perspective on life.
Well, and I've met a ton of people where it's like, I met, I sometimes meet people where their personal value as a person is tied to how good their art is. And I think
Yes.
that's really common when you're starting your career, because you don't have a family, or you don't really have much. Like, it's hard to be 19 and be really good at something else, or have another thing you really care about. And if you're an artist just doing this by yourself and you're not that good, or you're really good, but a lot of people expect a lot from you, then you're like, the second you lose that, or you get burnt out, or something happens, you break your hand, you lose your whole identity. And
That is so true. Yes. That has got to be part of it. And I think that was part of it with me as well.
yeah, that's part of it for me. That's part of the reason I'm not doing the whole concept art thing, is because it's hard for me to detach myself from the quality of my artwork. And I think it's important, important to acknowledge that and be aware of it. And it's totally okay. It's like, if you do artwork, you're going to be spending a lot of time doing it, and it actually becomes a part of your personality, who you are.
Oh yeah, I think you're right when you say, like, when you're young. And the other thing is too, like, when you go to art school, that was one of the cool things about art school, meeting all these other people, right? But when I was younger, in my own little life experience, people thought of me as the artist. You know, people were like, "Oh, he can draw this, draw that. Can you draw this for me?" That kind of thing. And then once you go to art school, it's like all those people from all over the world are in one place now. And now there's like people, like, now I'm meeting people that can draw better than me, and I'm like, oh shit, and there's all these talented people, and it's like, oh shit, okay. But yeah, it just becomes part of your personality, just like a singer's like, I'm a singer, and you think that's who you are. Yeah, so I think age helps with that. Not necessarily a bad thing when you're young, because again, I think, like, being obsessed, like, that's a time to be obsessed. You're young. If you're living with family, you don't got a lot of other responsibilities, and you can just, as long as you're not playing like video games 15 hours a day or something, I think it's good to be obsessed with, like, doing something that can lead to potentially a career. Again, I don't like to think that the only reason to do art is to get paid. I think doing art is good for you. I think it's like meditation or something, or reading or something. It's just good for you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain why, but I think you'll pursuing the betterment of yourself as an artist, I think, is a good practice for a healthy, fulfilled life and mental state.
Well, and I was at a dog. This might sound kind of corny or weird, but I was at a dog park a few weeks ago, and I was watching dogs fetch sticks. And those dogs fetching those sticks, that was the most meaningful thing to that. To those. And it's just like, you can look at it from an animalistic perspective and be like, those dogs fetching those sticks doesn't matter, but obviously not to those dogs. And to us, it's, it's like watching a dog fetch a stick is actually pretty fun, but if you look at it objectively, it's like meaningless, And I think it's the same thing with art. It's like, you could be like, this is meaningless, this is pointless, but maybe it's that's our own version of us being a dog fetching a stick. It's like something that we do, and it's important. It's something that's like not obvious why it's important, but
yes,
it's better to be doing that than like have no sense, like, than to be doing nothing at all, like sitting around
or wasting your time or something. Yeah. And also, back to the consuming, creating thing, I think you can kind of warrant it or something, like earn the consuming. It feels better, just like putting your feet up at the end of a hard day's work.
Right.
Like, I think through the lens of creating things, you get a better, deeper, richer appreciation of other things people created. And then that can feed, you can take part in the dance of both, rather than just, whatever, being a critic or something, where you're just consuming all the time and having an opinion about it.
Well, you were saying this earlier in the stream, where, when you were in your 20s, you got your first job, buying a new car, and, junk food and TVs and computers and stuff. And like, I did the same thing, and a lot of people do. And I found that stuff actually doesn't make me happy at all. Like, it actually makes my life more difficult, because I actually have more stuff to deal with. I'm eating a ton of bad food, so I feel worse. And, ultimately, it's like, I'm living in a van right now, and
which
like,
is dope.
And it's like, it's way more just like for myself valuing things in terms like I don't have a shower, so going and taking a hot shower somewhere is like way better of an experience because I
Yes.
can't do it every day. It's like
Yes. Yes. That makes sense.
yeah.
What do you do for
And
showers? Oh, sorry. Are we supposed to end the stream?
oh,
I was going to ask you about showers now.
um, I have a gym membership. Um,
Smart, dude.
uh,
The
yeah,
van
dude.
life.
Anytime Fitness is my membership.
Oh,
Um,
I haven't heard that.
if you want to keep going, we could totally keep going. But if
We
you
can
would
go
like
for a
to,
few more minutes
yeah,
if you're down.
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if we
But
have any more questions too. I don't want to like leave anyone hanging, but if not, yeah, I'm
yeah,
gonna just keep going.
Kitten says, "Is it a good idea to learn rigging and animation as a character artist?"
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
You can, but it'd be kind of a waste of time. I mean, doesn't I mean, I assume she said character artist, so I assume she means or I just assumed it was a she. Maybe I'm wrong, but I assume they mean like for a job, and
So it's a two-part question. Is it a good idea
okay.
to rigging and animation as a character artist? I have a genuine interest in the area, but I worry it'll be a waste of time.
Oh, well, I mean, what I was going to say is like my job is not to do that. That's someone else's job. So that could be your job. A technical animator or character rigger is what they're called.
Yeah.
And they are if you want to make a career out of it, it's actually better because there are less people that are qualified. So if you became a really good technical animator or animation TD or whatever, there's a bunch of names for it, but if you got good at like rigging in Maya, learning how to do the Unreal stuff, like you can open the Unreal rigs in Maya, you can export rigs to Unreal, you can look at the metahuman stuff. So building rigs, facial rigs, that kind of stuff, if you got good at that, you would be very valuable in all industries too, by the way. You could work in games, you could work in TV. There's going to be more and more and more TVs filmed the way that The Mandalorian was filmed, which was on a stage with the Unreal Engine. So there's just going to be a lot. Yeah, every year there's more jobs, and yeah, so the really good technical animators are kind of unicorns, and so anytime there's a job like that, that could be a good thing for you. So if you enjoy it, you should ride that. You should see how much you enjoy it by seeing how much rigging you can do and all the little technical tricks and stuff. So you got to be technically minded a bit, but yeah, it could be good.
Yeah. Well, and I think it relates to everything else we've been talking about, where if you have a genuine interest in it and you actually do, and you want to learn it, you do it. It's like, I think that like trying to build your skill set to fit a job is a bad idea because you're fitting it to, like, it's just not sustainable because you're fitting what somebody else wants you to be ultimately.
Yeah, and that's not going to feel good anyway. I mean, aren't we doing this because we don't want to feel that just like trapped, doing somebody else's work, just being a cog in a machine? Like I despise that feeling. It feels terrible. So I think as artsy creative people, we like that sense of agency and that we are in control of what we're doing, and yeah. So we should be doing that. If you want to do something, you should do that. You shouldn't be ever make yourself feel like you have to change for whatever reason and do something you don't want to do. Because then now you're right back into what a lot of other careers are. If you're willing to do something you don't want to do for money, then I don't know why you're doing this.
Yeah, exactly. One more question. Lucas Rodrigo says, "Hey Jay, what do you suggest for a person who wants to get their first 3D work? I like to sculpt and retopple characters. Do I need to texture them too?"
No, it depends on the work you're gonna do. I mean, if you're gonna retopo them, I don't know, maybe, but there's certain gigs where you just be doing the modeling. There's like doing collectibles, toys. Yeah, that kind of stuff. If you're gonna reach apologize, you might as well texture. I don't know why you wouldn't. You know, reach apology sucks. Texturing's fun. So if you're gonna get all the way, if you're gonna make a high poly and a low poly, you better bake it and texture it too, because that's fun, and that'll just make you. I mean, get over that hump. It's not gonna take long. Substance Painter is pretty easy to pick up, and then I think you're gonna enjoy it. It's one of the most like I remember using ZBrush, which is what we're using right now, like over 10 years ago, and it was obvious. It was just obvious the change, and I was like, oh, and like modeling is this now, and this is way better, and it's more fun. Substance Painter was the next time that I felt that. That was, that was like a decade later. I opened Substance Painter and I was starting to use it, and I was like, oh, yes, this is what it's gonna be. Because before that, we textured in Photoshop, which seems so dumb, and I never thought it was a problem. And then when I used Substance Painter, I was like, oh, it's great. So, yeah. So on the one hand, I think you can get work just doing models. You just got to be open to different kinds of, unconventional things and think outside the box and just apply to a bunch of stuff. Take a look at job boards, that kind of thing. You could even probably sell models. And then on the other hand, I don't know why you'd be adverse to texturing, because it's really cool and it's really fun and it brings models to life. So I actually, sometimes I model to texture, you know what I'm saying? Like I can't wait to texture the model. And I wouldn't have the same satisfaction texturing a model that somebody else made. So I kind of like have to do both, because I want both of those feelings. And then when it's done, I feel like a holistic satisfaction and pride about what I made, which took longer, but, no, it's like if you built a chair all by yourself and you're looking at it and you're like, that's cool. I built this chair, rather than like, I just painted the chair. You know what I'm saying? Yes.
Nice.
Nice. Well, I don't know, man. Is it that time?
Yeah. If you wanna end, I think it's a good time to end.
Okay. Before we do though, I wanted to say thank you for hanging out and keeping me company, dude. That was really cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of cool things to say and insights and stuff. It's cool that your mind's been in it for a while, and interesting dude, doing your own thing, going off on doing the van life experiment and everything. I think it's cool. You're following your trying to stay sane and everything. I like it. You're in the search for truth and everything. I think that's really admirable and makes it interesting to talk to you about these topics.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I would love to talk to you more. If you want to be on my podcast at some point, I'm starting a podcast.
Oh, yeah?
It's called the Sketchy
Let's go,
Van.
dude. I'm all in, dude. I'm all in on that. Let's talk more in your van, which sounds weird, but it's totally cool.
It is a sketchy van. It's the free candy van, But yeah, I'll message you when I get back from my trip around the country, and we can plan something.
Perfect.
Cool. Do you have any other closing thoughts? Like, how should people follow you? How should people get in touch?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I go by J Hill online, JHILL. So you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Art of J Hill. You can also just go to artofjhill.com if you want. Yeah, so I make YouTube videos. I talk about some of the stuff we're talking about right now, and just subjects I'm interested in related to 3D modeling and character art and stuff like that. So yeah, feel free to go hang out over there and say what's up.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. He's a good artist and great teacher.
Thank you, dude. Appreciate that.